So, good morning. To all of you in Singapore, and good day, good evening to anyone who's watching from some other place. So we are now doing the 6th in a series of talks on the topic of mind training or thought transformation, looking at the text called the 7-point mind training by Geshe Chekawa. And so far we have covered, there's 7 points altogether in this text, and we covered the first 2 of the 7 points. The first point is about preliminaries. There were 4 of those: precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, karma, the law of cause and effect, and then the unsatisfactory nature of samsara, cyclic existence. So we just went through those briefly because hopefully everyone has heard about them before. They're covered very extensively in the Lamrim. And here we are reminded that it's important to have a good grounding, a good foundation in those 4 topics as a basis for the main topic in this text, which is developing bodhicitta, the aspiration to become fully enlightened, and then various practices to help enhance that attitude, to have greater love and compassion, and have skillful ways of helping other beings, and so on. Okay, so that was the first of the 7 points, the 4 preliminaries. The second point was cultivating bodhicitta, the mind aspiring to become enlightened to help all living beings. And we did that by way of a method called equalizing and exchanging self and others, which has 5 points. First one is equalizing self and others, where we just contemplate that we're not really that different from each other. All people and all beings, in fact, have a lot in common, and it's really good to reflect on that and get a feeling for that, so we don't feel so distant from others and cut off from others. So that's a really important foundation to open our heart to others and have more love, more compassion, and better relations with others, and so on. So we can do that by contemplating how we are all the same, and we all want to be happy. We all want good experiences, and we don't want to suffer. Nobody wants suffering. Nobody wants pain. Nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to be hungry, to be poor, to lose the things we love, and so on and so forth. So we're all basically the same. We want to be happy, to feel good, and we don't want to suffer. And so contemplating that helps bring us closer to others. We feel closer to others. And other ways that we're similar is, well, we all have a body, all human beings, we all have basically the same kind of body, made of skin, blood, bones, flesh. We all are born from our mother as tiny little, this big infants. We don't remember that, but we've seen babies. We've all seen little newborn babies. We can look at that little baby and think, wow, I was like that once. I looked like that once, and I was totally dependent on my mother and my father and other people to take care of me. So we all come into the world basically the same, very tiny and helpless and totally dependent on others. And yeah, we have basically the same needs and same wishes and same interests. And then from the point of view of Buddhism, there's also a lot of things we have in common, like we're in samsara, which is a situation that's very unsatisfactory, very problematic, very imperfect. And we all have the same kind of disturbing thoughts and emotions in our mind. Like we get jealous when someone has more than we do, or we get angry when somebody hurts us or does something we don't like. We get attached to things that are pleasant, things we enjoy, and happiness, unhappiness, and so on. So basically we have the same kind of emotions in our mind. And many of these emotions are the cause of suffering, what we call afflictive emotions, disturbing emotions, and they are the cause of our suffering. So as long as these are present in our mind, we continue to have problems and suffering. But the Buddha discovered that these disturbing emotions are not permanent. They're not part of our mind forever and ever and ever, but we can become free of them. We can overcome them and make our minds completely clean, clear, pure, free of all disturbing thoughts and emotions. So that's what's called our Buddha nature. So Buddhism says we have the potential to become just like the Buddha, to have a totally pure, peaceful state of mind without any disturbing thoughts or emotions, without any suffering, physical or mental, and so on. So we all have that potential. Okay, so these are just some of the ways in which all people and all living beings are the same. So it's helpful to contemplate this so we feel closer to others, more open to others. That's the first point. And then we go on to look at, we compare these two attitudes. One is self-centeredness, where we feel I am more important than others. I am the most important person in the world, in the universe. Okay, so we all have that feeling, that attitude in our heart, and it's there almost all day long, motivating the things that we do. I want to be happy. I want this. I don't want that. So many of our decisions, our actions are just trying to find happiness for ourselves and avoid problems for ourselves. And we sometimes think about others and do things for others, but even then, it's often kind of connected with what's good for me, what makes me happy, and so on. And so that's one attitude we have. So we look at that attitude, and then we compare it with the opposite attitude. The opposite attitude, which is sometimes called cherishing others, or we could also call it altruism. That's when we are more open to others, more caring about others, thinking more about others, dedicating ourselves to others, doing what we can to help others. So we compare those two attitudes and try to see which one is better, which one brings more benefit, more happiness, both for ourselves and others. Hopefully, we'll come to the conclusion that self-centeredness is not a good attitude to have. It's not very satisfying, and in fact, it leads to lots of problems, especially if we want to become enlightened, if we want to become Buddha. We have to overcome self-centeredness. We can't be selfish and be a Buddha. There's no such thing as a selfish Buddha. So if we want to be a Buddha, we have to leave behind our selfishness. Yeah. And then the other attitude of altruism, cherishing others, and so on, that's what it takes to become a Buddha. So if we want to become a Buddha, we have to develop that. And that brings so much benefit to ourselves and everybody else. So hopefully we contemplate these points and we come to the conclusion, yes, I want to be more other-centered, more altruistic, more cherishing of others, caring for others, and less self-centered, have less selfishness. So that's the fourth point, exchanging self for others. That's when we come to the point where we decide, I'm really going to work on this. I'm going to make my mind change so that I'm more altruistic, more concerned about others, and less self-centered. And then the fifth point is the practice of Tonglen. That's a method that helps to bring about this transformation in our mind, to have less selfishness and more altruism, more caring for others. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about Tonglen, and we did some practice of Tonglen in the last 2 sessions. And I thought tonight, because I mentioned that there's one way of practicing Tonglen combined with the Four Immeasurable prayer. So I thought to start with that tonight, do a little practice of contemplating the four immeasurables and combining that with Tonglen, just so that you learn how to do that, because that's kind of an easy way of practicing Tonglen in your daily life. So you make some time for that. And in case anyone's not familiar with the four immeasurables, this is it's a whole practice actually, and it's found in all Buddhist traditions, Theravada tradition. There they call it the four Brahmaviharas, the four sometimes divine abodes, divine abidings, and we call it the four immeasurables. But they're these four thoughts: love or loving kindness, and compassion, and joy, and equanimity. It's really funny. Here, I'm staying in Sravasti Abbey, where there's about, how many? About 16 of us, 17 monastics. And we have 4 cats, 4 cats that belong to the community. And they're named after the 4 immeasurables, but the Sanskrit term. So there's Maitri and Karuna and Mudita and Upeka. So we can never forget the 4 immeasurables here, because we have these 4 cats and they're very lovely, very sweet. They're very much loved by everyone. Okay, so and then there's different prayers that you can use to recite the 4 immeasurables and contemplate them. So one is a short one that has just 4 lines. So I thought we'll do that one. And we'll just pause after each of the 4 lines and contemplate how we can practice giving and taking together with this. So let's start by making ourselves comfortable with your back straight, shoulders relaxed. Bring your awareness into your body. Feel your body. If there's tension anywhere in your body, see if you can release it. Let it go. Let it melt, flow out of you, sink into the earth below. Just let your body be as relaxed as possible. Let your breath flow in and out in a natural rhythm. Let your mind be relaxed. So you can do that by letting go of any thoughts there may be in your mind that are not related to what we are doing right now. So there might be thoughts about what you're going to do later today. Oh, you don't need to think about those right now. Put them aside for now. Or there may be thoughts about something you did earlier today. Again, put those aside. You don't need to think about them now. Now just let your mind be totally present right here, in the present place, right now, in the present moment. And just for a few minutes, be aware of your breath, your breathing flowing in and out. And then generate a positive motivation for doing this meditation and also being part of this session. So what we are looking at is something very precious, very important. It's the practice of cultivating bodhicitta and working for the benefit of others and working for enlightenment, becoming enlightened to help all living beings. Very, very precious teachings and practices. So ideally, we learn about these teachings and try to understand them and practice them, not just for our own sake, for our own benefit and happiness, but for the benefit of others. I'm sure we all do feel that way sometimes. We really do want to be helpful for others, for our family, our community, our country, and even the whole world. So bring that thought, that feeling into your mind. Wish that you could make your life as meaningful and beneficial as possible for others, as many other people and beings as possible. And then think that that is why you are participating in this session, doing the meditation right now, and then learning, listening and learning afterwards. So it's learning ways in which you can make your life more and more be meaningful and beneficial for all people and all beings, especially helping us all reach enlightenment. Okay, so I'll recite the lines of the prayer, the Four Immeasurables, and then just tell you how you can combine that with the practice of giving and taking, Tonglen. So the first line of the prayer has to do with loving kindness, Maitri, or Metta in Pali. Here we say, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. Really try to generate that feeling in your mind. How wonderful it would be if all beings everywhere could be happy and have the causes of happiness. So this we can combine with the practice of giving. Think of all your good qualities, your merit, virtue, good karma, resources, all the good things you have in your life, in yourself. You can imagine them in the form of something really beautiful at your heart, like a precious jewel, a sun, a star, bright, radiant. And imagine sending rays of light out from this beautiful object in your heart, and it goes to all directions and becomes whatever is needed by other sentient beings in order to be happy. For those who are hungry, it becomes food. For those who are lonely, it becomes friends, family. For those who are homeless, it becomes a comfortable home, and so on. Just imagine giving whatever is needed to bring happiness to each and every being, or as many beings as possible. It's also good to imagine giving them the inner qualities they need to be happy, like satisfaction and contentment with what they do have, and ethical discipline so that they don't misuse what they have, but they use it wisely and ethically to benefit themselves and not others, and others, and not do anything harmful. And you can even imagine helping them develop all the qualities they need to be able to progress along the path and finally reach enlightenment. Okay, then the second line of the prayer has to do with compassion, karuna. It says, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And just take a few moments to try to really generate that feeling in your mind. And here we can practice taking the suffering of others onto ourselves, using it to eliminate, overcome our selfish attitude, self-centeredness, ego, what blocks us from progressing along the path to enlightenment. So if you're comfortable doing that, imagine the suffering of others. If it's too much to think of the suffering of many people, many beings, you can think of just one person. Try taking on the suffering of one person you know and love and care about. Imagine that suffering coming in the form of smoke or fog. Breathing it in, and imagine it comes to the center of your heart chakra. There's our selfish attitude. Attachment to I, me, mine, myself. It gets in the way of good deeds and Dharma practice. You can imagine it as a kind of lump, dark, heavy lump in your heart. And the smoke or fog of others' suffering comes and absorbs into this lump of self-centeredness at your heart, and it completely destroys it, disappears, becomes non-existent, leaving that part of yourself open, clear, spacious, light, free of self-centeredness, free of ego, free of ignorance, and all the other disturbing emotions. And then the third of the four immeasurables is joy, mudita. And so the line says, may all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. So here we wish all living beings to always have happiness and good experiences in all their future lives, to always be born in good conditions in their future lives, and then eventually attain the highest states of liberation and enlightenment. So may they have the best possible happiness, genuine happiness in all future lives up to enlightenment. And just contemplate that, feel how wonderful that would be. Really wish for that to happen. And then again, send out your own good energy, your virtue, merit, good qualities, resources, all the good things you have in the form of light, sending out from your heart, going to all directions, to all beings, or as many as you can think of, and helping them achieve all the causes they need to be able to have good rebirths in their future lives and liberation and enlightenment. So that includes things like virtue, ethics, generosity, patience, and of course faith in the practice and dedication to the practice, joyous effort in doing Dharma practice and so on, and then love and compassion and wisdom. So imagine they gain all of these knowledge and qualities and realizations to be able to progress along the path and eventually reach liberation and enlightenment. And then the fourth immeasurable is equanimity, upekkha. This means a state of mind that's not stirred by attachment to some people and beings, and then aversion, anger, and hatred towards other people and beings, but an even-minded, caring attitude that respects everyone and is willing to work and help everyone without exception. So here the line says, may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of attachment and aversion that hold some close and keep others distant. Contemplate that. We try to generate that wish that everyone could have a mind free of these painful attitudes of attachment and clinging on the one hand, aversion and hatred on the other hand. Just a very calm, peaceful, abiding in equanimity, equal care for all living beings. So here we can imagine taking the attachment and aversion and other disturbing emotions that sentient beings do have in their mind. Imagine it coming out of them in the form of dark smoke or fog, breathing it in, absorbing into the black lump of self-centeredness at your heart, and then that becoming completely destroyed, becoming non-existent. And send out the attitude of equanimity, even-mindedness, balanced attitude of caring and respect for all beings without dividing them into friends and enemies and people we don't care about. Send out equanimity to all living beings and imagine it goes into their minds and their hearts, and they all gain this experience of equanimity. Okay, so you can now open your eyes. So that's a somewhat extended way of doing it, and you don't have to spend that much time. If you're short of time, if you have a busy schedule, then you could do it in a shorter amount of time. Also with more familiarity, the more you do it, the more you get used to it, then you could do it, much more quickly, maybe just spending 1 minute on each of the four immeasurables. So it's just a helpful way of getting more familiar with the practice of Tonglen, incorporating it into your life, because many people probably recite this prayer of the four immeasurables on a daily basis. And you can do it with a longer version. There's a longer version of the four immeasurable prayer as well that some of you may know. So you could use that prayer as well. So it's just a suggestion, a suggested practice, combining the four immeasurables with the practice of Tonglen. So continuing now with the text. So we've done the first 2 of the 7 points. We have 5 left. And in the commentary, which is called Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, page 81, if any of you have that book, it says that the last 5 points are called the 5 precepts that are factors of the training. Okay, so it lists the last 5 of the 7 points. The first of those is transforming adverse circumstances into the path. And then second is the integrated practice of a single lifetime. Third is the measure of having trained the mind. Fourth, the commitments of mind training. Fifth, the precepts of mind training. So those are the last 5 of the 7 points. And so tonight we'll start looking at the first of those, which is called transforming adverse circumstances into the path. And this is actually one of the most useful and juicy and beneficial sets of practices that there are. And so we'll start looking at this one tonight, and if we don't finish, we'll continue next week. So basically the idea is learning how to deal with bad things that happen to us, both our own experiences, like bad things that happen to us personally, as well as other people, like when bad things happen to people we care about, our mother, father, brother, sister, partner or spouse or child or pet. Okay, so people around us, people we're close to, people who are important parts of our life. So when bad things happen to them, that also affects us. We get worried and upset and don't know what to do and want to help and so on. And then also there's bad things that happen in the larger sense, like in our community, neighborhood, or town, or city, or country, and of course the world. So when bad things happen, and there's plenty of bad things happening all the time. So when bad things happen, then our usual way of responding is to get upset, and we sometimes even get depressed and feel kind of despair and, things are so bad, things are so terrible. We get worried and anxious and so on. So it affects our mind and also affects our Dharma practice. Sometimes it even becomes difficult to meditate, difficult to practice, because we're so upset and so worried about these problems. But the idea here in this topic is learning how we can deal with these bad things so that they don't make us so upset, they don't interfere with our Dharma practice, but we can even use them in our Dharma practice. They can become part of our Dharma practice and help us cultivate qualities we need to progress on the path. So we can actually use them to get closer, to get further along the path, closer to enlightenment. Okay, so let's just take an example. Let's say we get sick or we get injured, physically injured. So we have some pain, some discomfort, which of course isn't pleasant. And maybe we have to make some changes in our life, like missing work. We can't work, can't go to work. Maybe we can't eat the foods we normally like to eat. Or maybe we have no appetite at all, can't eat at all. Maybe we have to go to the doctors and get needles stuck in us and take medicine that has terrible side effects. It makes us sleepy and so on and so forth. So there's these changes that happen in our life, which are not pleasant, okay? And our usual reaction might be to feel unhappy and upset, maybe worried, anxious. How long is this going to go on? Am I going to get over this? Am I going to recover? Or maybe I'll get worse and worse and die. You know, these kind of thoughts might come up in our mind. We may become grumpy and irritable, you know, kind of snapping at people, not in a good mood. We may become depressed, have no energy, no joyful energy. We may feel sorry for ourselves. We may get angry at others, blaming others. It's your fault that this happened to me, and so on. So these are some of the kind of negative, disturbing thoughts and emotions that can come up in our mind when that kind of problem happens to us. And then it may interfere with our Dharma practice. We may not feel interested in doing any practice, maybe because we're just so worried or because we don't feel good, we don't feel well. So then, you know, our Dharma practice may suffer. We might also have doubt. This is another thing that can happen. We might have doubt about Dharma. For example, the thought might come up in our mind, wow, I've been doing so much Dharma practice, so much meditation and creating virtue and merit and so on. Why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening to me. I don't know if any of you have ever thought that way. If this does happen, if we find that kind of thought coming up in our mind, then it could be because we had unrealistic expectations. Example, maybe we thought that if we're practicing Dharma, everything should go well in our lives. We shouldn't have any problems. Actually, some people do think that way. You know, they may think, well, you know, Dharma, when we're practicing Dharma, we're not creating non-virtue. We're avoiding non-virtue, which is the cause of suffering. And we're creating virtue, which is the cause of happiness. So I'm creating all this virtue, which is the cause of happiness, and I'm not creating non-virtue, which is the cause of suffering. So I should only have happiness. I shouldn't have any bad things, any problems happening to me. So some people think that way. And then they may doubt the Dharma. And they may think, well, maybe Dharma doesn't work. Maybe it's all not true. The teachings are just something fake, something phony, not really true. So this is something that can happen, which is quite dangerous, because then you might just lose all interest, all enthusiasm to engage in Dharma practice. So the problem there is, the problem isn't Dharma. The problem is our way of thinking. Maybe we had the idea that as soon as we start practicing Dharma, all our bad karma would suddenly disappear. No more bad karma. So there shouldn't be any more karma that would cause problems. And actually, one reason we might get that kind of idea is because in our tradition, there are certain practices we do, like purification practices. We do Vajrasattva practice, we do the practice of the 35 Buddhas. And at the end of doing that practice, you know, with the 4 opponent powers, we're supposed to feel, now I'm completely purified. All my karma, all my afflictions, all my delusions, all that negativity is completely gone, completely purified. My body, mind are completely calm, clean, clear. So we're actually told to think that way. So some people might take that very seriously and think, oh, now I'm completely purified. I don't have any more bad karma. That means I shouldn't have any more problems, any more suffering. Nothing bad should happen to me. So it's true that we are supposed to think that way, but not take it so literally that, literally we have no more bad karma. Instead, the purpose of thinking that way is to realize that we have the potential, we have the ability to purify, to be free of all bad karma. But we can't get rid of all our bad karma just like that in one session of meditation or practice. Okay, so it's more a practice to encourage ourselves and to get in touch with our potential, the possibility to be pure. But some people might take it too literally and think, oh, I'm completely pure and no more bad karma. So why should bad things happen to me? So I don't know if anybody really thinks that way, but it's possible some people might think that way. So it's just not realistic to think that way because we have a huge amount of bad karma, not just from this lifetime, from the time we were born up until now, but we have past lives as well. Many, many, many past lives in which we did negative things. We created negative karma. So all that karma is still with us, and it does take time. It can be purified eventually, but not so quickly, not so easily. It takes time. So we need to continue working on doing purification practices every day if possible to purify. And also it takes realizations. It isn't just enough just to do Vajrasattva practice or 35 Buddha practice to purify all our negative karma. The main thing that purifies our negative karma is the wisdom realizing emptiness. Okay, that's the thing that will really clean us out, clean our mind out of all our karma and our afflictions, afflictive emotions, and so we don't have to experience any more suffering. So unfortunately, we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of things we need to do to be completely free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So if we have an understanding of the path, the more we understand the path, the Four Noble Truths, the more we understand the Four Noble Truths, the true suffering, the causes of suffering, the possibility of being free of suffering, liberation, and then the path that leads there, the more we understand that, the more we understand there's a lot of work to do. It's not something that we can do just quickly and easily. And and then also when problems do happen to us in our life, we understand that, well, there will be problems for a long time to come, as long as I'm on the path, as long as I haven't yet attained, higher realizations, especially the wisdom realizing emptiness, and of course, bodhicitta and so on. So problems will continue to happen in our life. Also, another thing we need to understand is that the real purpose of practicing Dharma isn't just to have happiness here and now in this lifetime. If that's what we're looking for, then that's not even genuine Dharma. That's worldly Dharma. This is the 8 worldly dharmas, or the 8 worldly concerns that want happiness here and now. I want to feel good. I want pleasure. I want money, gain as much as I can, have as much wealth and possessions as I can, have everybody love me and praise me and think I'm wonderful. So wanting all those kind of things to happen and not wanting any bad experiences to happen in this life, here and now, we need to check our mind and what is our thinking, what is our motivation there. And we'll probably find this is worldly Dharma, worldly concern, which is just concerned about this lifetime rather than future lives. So the real purpose of Dharma practice isn't just this lifetime, but rather it's long-term, thinking about our future lives, wanting to make sure in our next life and subsequent lives, we will be born in good conditions where we, again, have the chance to meet the Dharma, practice the Dharma, continue our development of the qualities and realizations we need to progress along the path and eventually attain liberation and enlightenment and benefit all sentient beings. So it's a long-term thing, not just this life, but probably many lives. I mean, it took Buddha many lifetimes to reach enlightenment. So it would be somewhat arrogant to think we can do it faster than that in this lifetime alone. So if we do find ourselves feeling upset or angry when problems happen, feeling surprised when problems happen, it could be useful to review the teachings of the Lamrim, especially the initial scope of the Lamrim and the middling scope of the Lamrim. So those teachings help us really understand, that the situation we are in is samsara, cyclic existence. Problems are going to keep happening again and again and again. And then we won't be so surprised or shocked when problems do happen to us. And on top of that, we'll understand that if we react with anger, worry, upset, depressed, and so forth, those kind of reactions don't help. And in fact, they just make things worse. Some of you may have heard, there's a sutra in the Pali tradition called the Salata Sutra, I think. I don't know if that's the right way of pronouncing it, Salata Sutra. But anyway, in that sutra, the Buddha he uses this analogy of arrows. He talks about arrows. He said, if you get shot with an arrow, okay, you got an arrow sticking in your body, that's painful, okay? That's one suffering, one bad thing happening to you. But it's possible that by the way we react, the way we respond to this suffering, we might shoot ourselves with another arrow, a second arrow, which means double the suffering, double the pain. So what he means by this, shooting ourselves with a second arrow, is if we react negatively when problems happen to us, getting angry, getting this shouldn't be happening to me, why is this happening to me, getting all upset, blaming other people, feeling sorry for ourselves, worrying, imagining that it's going to last forever and ever and ever. So these kind of reactions that typically people do experience, they are like shooting ourselves with a second arrow, or maybe a third arrow and a fourth arrow and a fifth arrow. Okay, we're just increasing our suffering, making our suffering bigger and worse rather than alleviating it. Have you heard of that teaching before? It's used quite a bit in the Theravada tradition. Yeah, and it's very useful, very juicy to think about that. So the Buddha himself said that if we get upset and react in an unwise way, in an unskillful way to problems, we're just increasing our suffering, just adding more layers on top of the first suffering that's already there. Okay, so it's really helpful to contemplate that and recognize that, yeah, those kind of reactions are not helpful. Of course, they're natural. It's natural that they come up. It still happens to me. I get upset, I get unhappy, I get worried when problems happen to me. But I can see that doesn't help, to go down that path. To let my mind get caught up in those kind of reactions is not at all helpful. So then I pull myself back and try to find something that's more helpful, more useful to do. And there are things we can do. So that's what this teaching is all about. Methods or tools that we can use when problems happen in our life or in the world around us to transform these unpleasant, bad circumstances so that they're not so bad, and they even help us to cultivate positive qualities and get closer on the path. So we'll look at some of these methods, and then before I forget, I just want to recommend another book I don't know if you can see this, but it's called No Mud, No Lotus by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a well-known Vietnamese teacher. And the subtitle of the book is The Art of Transforming Suffering. So no mud, no lotus. The Art of Transforming Suffering. So the idea of the title is, I mean, you know how the lotus flower is said to grow in a muddy place? It doesn't grow in nice, clean water. It only grows in mud, dirty, mucky mud. But then when the flower comes up above the water, it opens up and it's totally pure, totally clean and pure. No mud, no stains. So this is a traditional metaphor for enlightenment. The Buddha is born in the world, which is like the mud, the muddy pond, but rises up above the world and is totally pure. Mind is totally clean and pure, not stained at all. So the idea of the title here is, if we didn't have mud, we wouldn't have a lotus. If we want our mind to transform into enlightened mind, to open up into this beautiful, pure lotus of enlightenment, we have to start off in the mud. We can't just avoid the mud and have the beautiful lotus of enlightenment. And so the mud actually helps us if we know how to use it. If we know how to use the mud, the suffering, the problems, the difficulties of life, if we know how to deal with them wisely and use them wisely, they help us to transform. They help us to reach enlightenment. So that's the idea. So anyway, it's a very nice book, and Thich Nhat Hanh's style is always very gentle and simple and easy to understand, very inviting as well. It's like, you know, you just want to practice what he's advising. So that's another book. I'm not going to talk more about that, but if you're interested, another book about how to transform suffering. Okay, so let's go on with our present text. So the root text of the seven points, the next two lines say, when the environment and its inhabitants overflow with unwholesomeness, transform adverse circumstances into the path to enlightenment. So what this means is, this is kind of an extreme example. The whole environment and all the inhabitants, all the beings are overflowing with unwholesomeness. But it's kind of like what's happening right now in the world with COVID-19. And I mean, it's just about everywhere. I don't know if there's anywhere in the world, maybe a few islands out in the Pacific Ocean where they don't have any cases of COVID. But I think most countries, major countries, have problems, big problems, major problems with COVID-19. People getting sick, it's spreading from one to another, many people dying and so on. And then many other problems related to it, economic problems, people losing their jobs, having difficulty finding enough to eat and so on. And then there's the usual problems, corrupt leaders, corrupt business people, corrupt business practices, mental suffering, and so on. So there's so many problems in the world. And, you know, we might think, wow, things are so bad, things are so terrible right now. But I mean, if we look back in history, can we find a time anywhere in the history of this planet where there weren't big problems going on? Yeah, I mean, looking back, there's always been big problems. There's been wars, there's been famines, there's been plagues, and you know, epidemics like what's happening now. Corrupt leaders, corrupt governments, and so on. So it's kind of just the story of human beings on this planet that we have these kind of problems. So it's probably not really worse than it was before. It's just different kinds of problems. um, so, and yeah, Buddhism says this is just how it is in samsara, in cyclic existence. You know, there's always problems, there's always difficulties. But what we're talking about here is that problems, our own personal individual problems, as well as the problems happening with other people in the world and so on, can be useful in our Dharma practice. So we don't have to think that, oh, these problems are terrible and there's nothing good about them at all. They're just like garbage that we have to throw away. Instead, they're actually more like compost. You know, if you have a garden, you take, we do that here in the Abbey, you know, we collect all the garbage, all the food garbage, you know, tea bags and vegetable peelings and so on and so forth, leftover food. So we put it all in a big bin, then it turns into compost, fertilizer for the garden. Okay, so it can be recycled, reused in a beneficial way. So in the same way, the problems, that the bad things that are happening, we can use those to nourish our inner garden, where we're trying to cultivate positive qualities like patience and kindness and compassion and wisdom and, of course, virtue and ethics and so on. So if we know how to use problems and difficulties, they help grow these positive qualities in ourselves and help us progress along the path. So the commentary, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, makes two divisions of this topic. The two divisions are transforming adverse conditions by thought and transforming adverse conditions by action. In other words, the first part is things we can do on the level of thinking, or, you know, changing our thoughts, changing our attitudes. And the second one is more actions that we can do, activities that we can do. So transforming adverse conditions by thought is covered by the next line of the text, the root text, which is, apply meditation immediately at every opportunity. And when it says here, transforming adverse conditions by thought, the thought is mainly the thought of bodhicitta, love, compassion, dedication to helping other sentient beings, and so on. So that kind of attitude of bodhicitta. And I'll just read what it says in this commentary, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, on page 82. It says, we should take lightly every mental or physical difficulty that befalls us, be it great, moderate, or slight, whatever the circumstances, in happy times or hard times, whether we are at home or in a foreign country, in a village or a monastery, in the company of human or non-human friends. We should think of the many kinds of sentient beings in the boundless universe afflicted with similar troubles, and make prayers that our own sufferings may serve as a substitute for theirs, and that they may be parted from all misery. Considering how wonderful it is to have fulfilled the purpose of our practice of compassion by taking on the suffering of others, we should sincerely rejoice. Okay, so basically what he's saying there is, whenever we experience any kind of problem, big or small, wherever we may be, we can use that as an opportunity to think about other beings, other sentient beings, and how they have suffering too. And in fact, we can probably notice that the suffering of others is probably much worse than the suffering that we're experiencing. I mean, that's I mean, always be the case, but I can, whenever I face a problem, that's what I think. I think, well, this problem may look really big right now to me. Excuse me. But if I think about the problems that other people are experiencing, my problem can look very small. Yeah. So that itself is very helpful, because the Dalai Lama talks about this. And I think it's very true that when we have a problem, our mind tends to get a bit obsessed. Yeah. Kind of focus on our problem when we keep thinking about it and worrying about it again and again and again. Obsessively. It can be obsessive. And when we do that, the problem can seem to grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it seems like really huge, really enormous. Yeah, bigger than it is. We have this expression in English, making a mountain out of a molehill. Molehill is just a little mound of dirt. So by worrying about it, it can seem like a huge mountain. And but then if we think about what other people are going through, like right now, so many people experiencing incredible difficulties, people who have COVID, people who've lost jobs, people right now in America, some people are losing their homes as well. They can't pay their rent anymore and have no money to keep their home. People are hungry, and there are food banks, places where people can go and get free food, but they have limited resources. So sometimes they run out of food and they can't give food to everybody who needs it. So some people are facing really, really huge problems. So when I look at my problems compared with theirs, then my problem will seem smaller and smaller and smaller, like just a molehill rather than a mountain. So that itself is helpful. But the real point, the real reason for thinking this way is to generate compassion. Generate compassion for others, realizing how much suffering they have, and how, just like me, they don't want to suffer. They want to be free from that suffering, just as I do, just as I would. So that enables us to open up our heart and feel compassion for them. But then he's saying here, this is what I was talking about last week as well, that we generate this wish that the suffering we are going through, the pain, the difficulty, whatever it is we have, that by experiencing that, the suffering of all those other people, all those other beings will disappear. May I experience the suffering on behalf of them so that they can be free of it. Okay, so that's like a kind of Tonglen practice where you're using your own problem, your own difficulty, to think of the suffering of others, generate compassion, generate love, and wish them to be free of suffering. So that's what he's advising here. So this is one of the best ways, one of the most powerful ways of using a difficulty, a problem, and making it part of the path. And not only does it become part of the path, helping us get closer to enlightenment, but it just makes the whole problem, the whole experience much better. We're not so miserable. We're not so worried. We're not so, caught up in disturbing thoughts and emotions. Our mind becomes much more calm and peaceful and accepting of the situation, and is in a more positive state, a more virtuous state. So that's what this text mentions. And I'll just mention a few other practices, other things that we can do. Because, I mean, if you're not so familiar with bodhicitta and loving kindness and compassion and so on, you might find that practice a little difficult. But there's plenty of other things we can do when we face problems that can help alleviate the suffering and use the problem in our practice, help us, practice more and get closer, further along the path. So another book I'd like to recommend is Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book, Transforming Problems into Happiness. I think ABC had a free copy, free giveaway, free what do you call it? Free distribution of that book. Yeah. So there should be plenty of copies around in Singapore. That's a very good book as well. That's again all about this idea of how to manage problems so that we don't suffer so much, and we can even make them part of our practice. So I'll just mention some of the other ways that we can do that. So one is impermanence, just thinking about impermanence. I find that one really, really helpful. Just to remember that nothing is permanent. So this problem, the difficulty, whether it's mental and unhappy thoughts or physical sickness, it's not going to last forever. So just reminding yourself of that, because I find, and probably this happens to other people as well, when a problem happens, there's some part of the mind that tends to think, oh, it's going to be here forever. It's never going to go away. I'm going to have this problem forever. It's really strange. I mean, it's not at all true, but somehow, I don't know, this mind comes up. So if you just challenge that and say to yourself, no, it's not going to be here forever. It's not going to last forever. It's impermanent. Maybe it may last a few minutes or a few hours, maybe a few days, but it's going to go away. So that helps too, just to not take it so seriously and make a big deal out of it, and just manage it better until it does go away. Another thought we can use is karma. If you believe in karma, if you accept karma, then you can contemplate that the problems we are experiencing are mainly the result of karma that we created in the past. And it's negative karma, bad karma. I must have done something negative in the past that I'm having this problem now. Now, we have to be careful about this, because this doesn't mean then we should feel guilty, we should feel bad, we should feel, oh, I'm a terrible person, I created really bad karma, and oh, what did I do? What did I do? That kind of thing. That's not correct. That's not appropriate thinking like that. Because for one thing, most people don't really deliberately get caught up in afflictive emotions. I mean, most people don't wake up in the morning and decide, I'm going to get really angry today and I'm going to yell at somebody, I'm going to hurt somebody, I'm going to steal something. I mean, some people might do that, but probably most of the time, we just don't have any control over our mind. We just have all these seeds of afflictive emotions in our mind, and they just pop up. We find ourselves caught up in anger or attachment or fear or jealousy, and we don't know how to manage this situation. It's just like we're carried away by a tsunami wave of strong thoughts and emotion, and we just find ourselves acting them out and doing something negative. So I'm sure for most people it's like that. We just don't have any choice. We don't have any control. And at the root of it all is ignorance, confusion. Our mind is just so confused about things. We just don't see things realistically. We see things in a completely mistaken way. So our mind is like under the control of ignorance, disturbing emotions, and lacking the wisdom and the other good qualities we need to be able to guide ourselves in a skillful way. So we need to have compassion for ourselves. We need to be very, very compassionate for ourselves and not beat ourselves up when we do negative things, or if we experience problems which are the result of negative things we did in the past. We need to forgive ourselves, be kind to ourselves, and not beat ourselves up. But thinking about karma is just helpful for several reasons. One is we can say to ourselves, okay, I must have done something negative in the past, and that's why I'm having this problem now. And I don't like this happening to me. I don't want to have it happen again. I don't want to have to go through this again. So I better make sure I don't create that karma anymore. I have to stop creating bad karma because this is what happens. And I don't like this. I don't want this. I want good things to happen to me. Oh, that means I have to create good karma. I have to create virtue. So it becomes a lesson in karma, refraining from non-virtue, creating virtue as much as we can so that we have good experiences and not bad ones. And we can also do purification practice to clear up that bad karma. So that's one way that thinking of karma can help transform this situation into something positive, something useful. Is make a strong determination to refrain from bad karma, create good karma as much as we can. And also, one thing, I mean, the Tibetans do this as well. They say when a bad thing happens, like I get sick, that means some bad karma is getting paid off, like debts are being paid off. And that's a good thing. That's less bad karma that I have, that I'm carrying around with me. Oh, that's good. That's another way of bringing in karma. If that works for you. I mean, it may not work for you, so then you can try something else. Of course, love, generating love and compassion, thinking about other beings and how they suffer too, and they don't want to suffer, and then generating love and compassion. That's also very, very, very powerful, very helpful. Another thing is renunciation, just reminding ourselves that this is the nature of samsara, cyclic existence. As long as I'm in samsara, I will keep experiencing problems like this again and again and again and again. I really have to get myself out of this. That's also self-compassion, compassion for yourself. I shouldn't have to be stuck in samsara, experiencing problems and suffering over and over and over again. I don't deserve that. I don't want that. I want to be happy. I want to be free of suffering. But that's compassion, the best kind of compassion for oneself. I want to free myself from this situation, not have to suffer anymore. So then when suffering happens, that's a reminder of how we need to work, we need to create the causes to be free of suffering, which is ethical conduct and concentration, wisdom. So the 3 higher trainings, those are the main causes to free ourselves from samsara, cyclic existence. So actually, in Shantideva's text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, there's a verse in there, I forget which chapter it's in, but he points out the good qualities of suffering. He says suffering has good qualities. And he mentions a few things here. So he says suffering eliminates pride. So the way that works is when things are going well, we're doing really well, not facing too many problems, we can easily become kind of arrogant, proud. Wow, I'm so great. I'm so fantastic. Not that we deliberately think that way. It's just we get kind of puffed up, full of ourselves, we say. When a problem happens, it's a bit like we get deflated. That puffed up balloon of arrogance gets a pin stuck in it, and we go, oh, I'm not so great as I thought I was. I still have problems. So that's actually a good thing, because pride is a big hindrance to spiritual practice, to spiritual development. Pride, arrogance is a, yeah, it's one of the delusions, one of the afflictive emotions that we need to overcome. So he's saying when suffering happens, when problems happen, it deflates our pride and helps us to have more humility, to be more humble. And that's a good thing. That's something to think about and look at in your own experience. So that's the first thing he mentions. It eliminates pride. And the second thing is causes compassion to arise to others in samsara. Okay, so we talked about that already. When we are suffering, we can understand others who are suffering. Oh yeah, I know what that's like. I've been there too. So that opens up our heart, enables us to have compassion for others. And then he mentions one becomes careful to avoid negative karma and inspired to like virtue. Okay, so I talked about that already, that it helps us realize how important it is to avoid bad karma as much as we can and create virtue as much as we can, because we want happiness, we don't want to suffer. So it's up to us, it's in our hands. It's our responsibility to do what we can. Okay, so those are some methods. And again, there's more methods you can find in Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book, Transforming Problems into Happiness, and Thich Nhat Hanh's book, No Mud, No Lotus. Lots of very practical, helpful advice for dealing with problems and difficulties so we don't get down, we don't get depressed, we don't get upset, and then just create more suffering and more bad karma. And instead, we can create virtue, do good things with our suffering. That's very, very helpful. But one last thing, and then I'll stop and let you ask questions. Using these methods to transform suffering and problems doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to solve the problem. Like if you're sick, it doesn't mean you have to just stay at home and, you know, practice thought transformation and don't go to the doctors. Okay, it's fine to seek solutions to the problem. In fact, Shantideva, another verse from his text says, if a problem can be solved, there's no point in being upset about it. And if a problem can't be solved, there's also no point being upset about it. So by that, he's saying, yeah, if there's a solution, do it, go for it. You know, do what you can to solve the problem. But sometimes there is no solution. Sometimes there's nothing that can be done. Like with the weather, for example, we can't change the weather. If it's raining, we can't stop the rain, but we can take shelter. So there's always something we can do to manage the problem. So it's fine to seek a solution if there is one. But you know, the solution may not work, or it may take a while before it works. So while we're waiting for the solution to work, the problem is still there. Then we can use these other methods, these tools, these techniques to work on our mind and our attitude, transform it into the path. Okay, so I'll stop there, and there's a bit more about this topic we'll do next week, but I wanted to leave you some time to ask questions if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, if there's anyone who has any question, please raise your hands. Faye has a question. Faye, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Venerable. I have a question about purification practices. So, I mean, the only one I know is the Vajrasattva purification, which takes quite a bit of time for me, like maybe half an hour. But I'm wondering, like, are there any mantras we can say or something that if we have a busy schedule, we can kind of like recite or do something throughout the day, some that is for purification too?
Yeah. I mean, Vajrasattva is one method for doing purification, but it's not the only one. I mean, the most important thing. What's happening?
I think your video is off. Oh, I can.
What happened to the?
Now we can see you, but the background is.
Went off. Well, it's on now, but it's only the green screen.
Click that. Click and unclick.
Yeah, I can see the green.
Is that better? Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Okay. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So, oh yeah, purification. So the most important thing when doing purification are what are called the four powers. Okay, you probably learned about the four powers. Regret, feeling regret for what we did, recognizing we did something negative, feeling regret for it. And then refuge. Actually, the second one is called reliance, which means taking refuge and generating bodhicitta, compassion and love, kind of renewing our commitment to following the Buddha and his teachings and really trying to live compassionately and do only what's helpful and not harmful to others and so on. And then the third power is, I usually call it remedy. And that's doing something virtuous, something positive to go against the negative thing we did. So there you can do almost anything. You can do Vajrasattva mantra, but like you say, that's a long mantra. It's quite long. So you could use another mantra. You could use Om Mani Padme Hum, which is very short, or you could use the Buddha's mantra, Om Mani Muni Ma Muni Soha, or Tara's mantra, any mantra. But you could also do, they say you can do anything that's virtuous. So you can also give a donation to some worthy cause. You could help somebody who needs help. You can meditate on loving kindness. So anything that's virtuous, anything that's positive can be used as that particular remedy. Okay? And then the fourth step, fourth power, is making a resolution to not do that action again as much as possible. So those are the most important things, those four things. So even if you're in the middle of your day and you can't stop and do a Vajrasattva practice, you can just pause and close your eyes and then just run through those four in your mind. We could think of the Buddha, for example, and just say, Buddha, I'm really sorry I did that. I know that was wrong. I take refuge in you, and I will really try not to do that again. And then do some mantras, a few mantras. So you could do it, you know, just in a few minutes. Okay. At work or on the bus or walking in the park or whatever. Yeah. So those four things are the most important things.
Okay.
Doing those four in your mind and doing something positive, something constructive. And it's usually recommended, like at the end of the day, if we can't do any purification practice during the day, it's good at the end of the day to think back and, oh, did I do anything that I need to purify? And then if you do think of something, then do some practice. But again, it doesn't have to be Vajrasattva. It could be Shakyamuni Buddha. It could be Chenrezig. Any deity that you take refuge in and recite their mantra. Is that okay?
Yeah.
If
Thank
you're
you so much.
You're tired, you don't have much time, you can still do something.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody has any question? Actually, Venerable, I actually have a question about the four immeasurables.
Yeah.
You know, the first immeasurable is about, you know, love and, you know, you wish another person to be happy. And the third one is also about wishing other people to be happy. So, you know, the question is, so what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, it is a good question. I wonder that too. But when it's explained more extensively, not just in that prayer, but you know, doing, you know, more extensive meditation on the four, loving kindness, the way I understand, I could be wrong, but this is how I understand it. Loving kindness is wishing others to have happiness. So there you think about what will make people happy, okay? And wish that they have those things. And sometimes when I have time, I'll actually do some meditation and think, you know, imagine myself actually giving to others, the things that will make them happy and make they look happy and so on. And then joy is, seems to be explained in different ways. Like one explanation is, it seems similar to rejoicing. Now, I could be wrong about this, but we talk about rejoicing, and that is when we feel happy for the happiness of others or for the good deeds of others. Yeah. So, yeah, it seems that there can be different ways of doing it. But I guess one way is when others do have happiness, instead of feeling jealous of them, which we often do, you see somebody wearing some nice new clothes or driving a nice new car, or they have a nice new boyfriend or girlfriend or something good happening in their life, we may feel jealous. Yeah. So that's the opposite of mudita, of joy. So joy is feeling happy for others' happiness, sharing in the happiness of others rather than jealousy. So it's kind of an antidote to jealousy. And so that's one way of understanding it. Happy that others are happy, but it's not that clear from the prayer itself. That line in the prayer that says, "May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free of suffering." So that seems to be talking. Well, it could be talking about the same thing. We want them not to lose the happiness that they have. Whatever happiness they have, we don't want to take that away from them. We don't want them to lose that. Because this is what can sometimes happen in our mind with jealousy. We kind of wish the person could lose that nice thing that they have. It's a horrible thought, isn't it? But it does sometimes pop up in our mind because we find it so unbearable to see them happy. We don't want them to be happy. We want that to stop. So when someone is happy, they're doing well, they're having good experiences, mudita or joy is being happy for them and wishing that to continue rather than wishing it to stop. But I like to think, like I mentioned when we were doing the meditation, to wish them to have happiness, not just now, but in the future, including future lives. May they have good rebirths in their future lives and eventually get out of samsara altogether, achieve liberation and enlightenment. So it's kind of long-term happiness. I mean, that's just how I think of it. I get, there could be other ways of thinking about it. But yeah, that's the one that makes sense to me. But yeah, there does seem to be a kind of crossover between love and joy. But I think that's okay, because in a way, joy is a further extension of love. We love people, we want them to be happy now, but joy is wanting to see them happy in a longer term way, longer term sense.
Thank you. Anyone has any question? Chunhao has a question. Hold on. Yep. Chunhao, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Venerable.
Hi.
You see, sometimes when we practice loving kindness to say give our enemies or people that we hate, so we wish them to be happy. So in our meditation, we keep on wishing them to be happy. Then suddenly we realize he become ourselves like, hey, why am I giving this guy so happiness? Or your jealousy, your anger start coming out. So how do you balance that?
Your voice was cut off a little bit. So you're saying when there's some negative person and we are
your negative person, you are wishing in your meditation, you're wishing them to be happy, and then the person seems to be getting happier and happier. The person that you don't like seems to be getting happier and happier and happier, and then suddenly then you realize, hey, this person, I don't like him. Why I'm giving him happiness? Or so then you start to get angry with yourself. So how do you balance that sort of?
Well, I think you need to understand then that you need to kind of go back a few steps and really check, did I really wish that person to be happy? Or was I just saying that? Was I just saying those words to myself? But deep in my heart, I didn't completely feel that way. You know what I mean? It's like very easy to say those words, to say that prayer. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So easy to recite those words. Yeah, to say those words and maybe even feel, oh, that's such a nice feeling I have. But how deep does that really go in our mind, in our heart? Yeah. So if we notice, like you're saying, when the person is happy, no, I don't want them to be happy. They shouldn't be happy. So that means it's not 100% genuine. And so you need to kind of go back and look at that. Okay, why do I feel this way? Why am I angry at this person? And actually, I mean, realistically, if there is still anger towards somebody and we're just trying to force ourselves to, wish them happiness, maybe it won't work. Maybe we have to deal with the anger first. It's like the anger is blocking us. So we need to go back and look at that anger. Why am I feeling this anger? And what can I do about this anger? How can I change this anger? It's like anger and love are totally opposite. They're like 180 degrees opposite. So we can't, maybe it's just not realistic to totally transform anger, get rid of anger and suddenly feel love. We might need to do some other things along the way. Did you understand what I'm saying? So if you're noticing that there's anger there in the mind, you need to acknowledge that, admit that, and then look at, okay, what can I do about this anger? How can I change this anger? How can I stop feeling this anger? Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Junhao? Yeah. So there's lots of methods. Okay. Many methods for dealing with anger. Like Venerable Thupten Chödrön wrote a wonderful book called Working with Anger. And of course, Shanti Deva, in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, a whole chapter 6 about anger. So many ways of dealing with anger. So, I mean, what you're saying is just realistic. It's just kind of normal. And in a way, it's good that you get a chance to see that there is still anger there in your mind that you need to work on before you can really, genuinely wish happiness for this person. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Okay, next is Faye. Faye has a question. Faye, you can unmute yourself.
Venerable. I was just wondering, for when the prayers say like all sentient beings, does that include plants too? I don't know if the Buddha regards them as sentient beings.
Well, yeah, this is a question that often comes up because like some experiments have been done where people talk to plants or play music for plants, and the plants seem to respond. They grow better if you send them love and you play nice music. But if you get angry at them and you send negative energy, then they don't do very well. And so, yeah, people then think, oh, plants, they must have mind too. They must be sentient beings. But Buddhism says no. They don't have minds. They're not considered sentient beings, because when the Buddha gave us advice to not kill, okay, that's the first precept, to not kill. We shouldn't kill any sentient being, including human beings, but also insects, animals, and so on. But he didn't say plants. He didn't say you can't cut your plants. You can't pull up a carrot because that's killing. Buddha didn't say that. So, yeah, Buddha didn't consider plants to be sentient beings. However, However, plants are often homes for sentient beings. You know, there can be insects living in plants, and of course the big, like trees, you know, birds live in trees, other animals live in trees. And also there's stories in the Buddhist teachings about devas. Devas are these kind of beings that we don't see, heavenly beings. So they can sometimes live in trees and plants as well. And so since plants and trees and so on are homes for sentient beings, it wouldn't be right to destroy them for no reason. So yeah, so we should respect them, take care of them, treat them well, and not because they themselves are sentient beings, but because they provide homes for other sentient beings. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wait, one more question. Like, I was just curious what your thoughts are on like the concept of spirits. Like, you know, some countries believe in like spirits that existed for centuries, but that goes against like the concept, Buddhist concept of like rebirth, and that we keep like changing
Mm-hmm.
minds. But then the spirits are saying, but I mean, the concept of spirits is saying we kind of continue as, like, I will continue as Faye, as a spirit. I'm just curious what you think.
Spirits. Well, I mean, there are some beings who have very long lives, like devas. In Buddhism, there are these deva realms. There's actually many deva realms. Sometimes they're called heavens, like heavenly realms. And the beings in those realms can have very long lives, much longer than ours. So, I mean, I don't know what kind of beings you're talking about when you say spirits, but that is one possibility. They could be, you know, that kind of being that has a very, very long life. That doesn't necessarily mean they will live forever and ever and ever. I mean, Buddhism says there's some beings that may live for thousands of years, but they eventually die. Their karma runs out to be in that place, in that realm. They die and then they are again reborn. So maybe, I'm just guessing, maybe these beings you're talking about are beings that have long lives.
Okay. So like deities like Tara, Chenrezig, they don't die.
Those are Buddhas. Although, well, in the Chinese tradition, I think they're regarded like Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig. Kuan Yin is regarded as a bodhisattva. Um, Tibetan Buddhism, we regard them as Buddhas, already enlightened. So no, they don't have to die and take rebirth like us. They're special. They've achieved a higher state, higher level, so they don't have to die.
All right. Thank you.
So maybe we should stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Getting late here.
Oh,
It's okay. Okay, so thank you very much for listening and for your questions. And let's just take a few moments to make a dedication. So we spent this time together with a good motivation, the motivation to help all living beings as much as we can, reach enlightenment so we can help all living beings. And so we had that as our motivation for doing the meditation, listening, thinking about, talking about these teachings. So we created a lot of merit, very, very good energy, positive energy. So let's share this merit with others, with all other beings, all sentient beings. They need so much help. They have so much suffering, so much confusion. So may this merit help them be free of their suffering, free of the causes of suffering. May they all meet with the teachings that will help them to create happiness, the virtue and happiness, the cause of happiness, and eventually reach complete enlightenment, free of all suffering, perfect in all good qualities. Okay, thank you.
You. Thank you
Good
very much.
day.
Good night.
See you next week.
See you.
Bye
Yes. Good night.
bye.